The sun had just begun to dip below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the bustling streets of downtown Los Angeles. It was a typical evening, cars honking, people rushing home, and the hum of the city never quite fading. But that night, something unusual was happening. Something that would shake the very foundation of the American education system. In a small conference room, Elon Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur known for his revolutionary ideas and unfiltered statements, sat at the head of a table. The room was filled with journalists, eager to hear his latest thoughts on the future of technology, space exploration, and, as it turned out, something that would leave people speechless: the Department of Education. With his usual mix of confidence and controversy, Musk leaned forward and made a declaration that no one could have predicted. The Department of Education, as we know it, no longer exists. The room fell silent. Cameras clicked, pens scribbled furiously, and for a moment, it felt like time had stopped. Was he joking? Was this just another one of his dramatic stunts? After all, Elon Musk was known for making bold, almost impossible claims. But there was something about his tone that made the room hesitate. This was different. This wasn't just another tweet or cryptic statement. A journalist, her voice shaky from the weight of the moment, managed to ask, "Are you saying the Department of Education should be shut down?" Musk, without missing a beat, nodded. "The system we've built around education is outdated. It's inefficient. We can do better, much better. The future of learning isn't tied to a bureaucracy." His words hung in the air, leaving everyone in that room with more questions than answers. The implications were huge, even more so than anything he had ever said about Tesla or SpaceX. The Department of Education had been an essential part of the American government for decades. Now, here was Musk, a man whose influence stretched across industries, declaring that it was no longer necessary. "Is this the future of education?" he asked, looking around the room. "Can we afford to keep a system that doesn't meet the needs of today's students? Or are we ready for something new, something that truly prepares our children for the future?" In that moment, the questions were not just for the journalists in the room. They were for everyone. For parents, teachers, students, and lawmakers. What would happen if we no longer had a centralized system governing education? What would the future of learning look like? Would we find new, innovative ways to prepare future generations, or would we fall into chaos without the guiding hand of the DOE? The world outside that conference room was already buzzing with the news. Social media exploded, headlines began to surface, and people everywhere began weighing in on Musk's bold claim. Some supported him, believing that education needed a radical overhaul. Others were outraged, unable to imagine a world without the Department of Education overseeing the country's schooling system. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from, a voiceover on a viral video urged. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? As the night wore on, it became clear. This wasn't just a debate about education. It was about the future of society itself, and the role that institutions, old and new, would play in shaping that future. And so, with that one statement, Elon Musk had sparked a firestorm. A firestorm that would change the way we thought about education, technology, and the future of learning. But the real question remained. Could Musk's vision for the future of education truly replace the Department of Education, or would this vision collapse under the weight of a system built over a century? The story had just begun, and it was only getting started. The Department of Education, a symbol of American educational governance, had a long and complex history. Founded in 1867 and restructured several times, it had evolved from a small office focused on collecting data into a powerful department responsible for ensuring equal access to education across the nation. Over the years, it had been instrumental in shaping the academic lives of millions, establishing regulations, providing funding, and holding schools accountable for meeting certain standards. Yet, despite its long history, many saw the DOE as a cumbersome institution, an organization slow to adapt, tangled in red tape, and at times, disconnected from the real needs of teachers and students. Critics had long argued that the education system was not preparing students for the future, that it was stuck in a system designed for a bygone era. Technology had reshaped nearly every other part of life, but the classroom, for many, still looked the same. And then there was Elon Musk. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, Musk was no stranger to breaking the mold. As a young boy, he had a voracious appetite for knowledge, devouring books on science, technology, and philosophy. But he didn't always fit into traditional educational structures. His rebellious streak and dissatisfaction with conventional schooling would follow him throughout his life. Elon had famously dropped out of a PhD program at Stanford after just 2 days to pursue business ventures. His vision for the future wasn't about following the path laid out by others. It was about creating a new one. From launching Zip2 to co-founding PayPal, to founding Tesla and SpaceX, Musk had built his empire by thinking outside the box. His companies were revolutionizing transportation, energy, and even space exploration. But when it came to education, Musk had a clear and controversial stance. The traditional system wasn't built for the future. In an interview several years ago, Musk had shared his thoughts on education. The current system doesn't work. It teaches kids to memorize and follow directions, but it doesn't teach them how to think critically, solve problems, or innovate. We need to radically rethink how we teach, what we teach, and who gets to teach. Musk had been known for supporting alternative education models. He had even founded a school called Ad Astra, meaning to the stars, for his own children, where the focus was on critical thinking, creativity, and problem-solving. There were no grades or traditional subjects. Instead, the kids tackled real-world problems and were given the freedom to explore their interests. Musk had argued that the traditional school system stifled creativity, forced conformity, and didn't foster the kind of innovation that was necessary for the future. To Musk, the Department of Education represented the old guard, an institution mired in bureaucracy, inefficiency, and an outdated mindset. He wasn't one to mince words, and his opinions on the DOE were no exception. In fact, Musk had been vocal in the past about how the education system needed to evolve. He had criticized standardized testing, which he believed failed to measure true intelligence, and the rigidity of curriculum that did little to prepare students for the complexities of the real world. Musk had often spoken about how schools prioritized memorization over creativity and problem-solving, skills he deemed essential for success in the modern age. But his stance was far from universally accepted. For many, Musk's comments about education sounded more like a disruption than a solution. He was a tech mogul, not an educator, and many argued that his ideas, while innovative, lacked practical application. Would the world really be better off without the structure and oversight provided by the Department of Education? Could Musk's vision really replace the decades of work that had gone into building and refining the educational system? As the media circus surrounding Musk's recent comments grew, so did the division. Supporters of Musk's radical ideas saw him as a visionary, someone who had the power to transform society. They argued that the traditional education system was outdated and inefficient, and that Musk's technological solutions might provide the innovation needed to address those issues. They pointed to his successes in the tech world as proof that Musk could bring about real change, even in an area as entrenched as education. On the other hand, critics were quick to dismiss Musk's suggestion as naive, even reckless. The Department of Education was a safeguard for millions of students across the country, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds. The idea of dismantling it, they argued, was not only unrealistic but dangerous. What would happen to the most vulnerable students, the ones who depended on federal support for their education? Without the DOE, would there be a safety net for them? The debate raged on, but one thing was certain. Elon Musk's comments had ignited something that could no longer be ignored. The idea that education could be completely reimagined, that the DOE might not be needed at all, was no longer a question of theory. It was a real, tangible conversation that had to be addressed. In the midst of this storm, Musk was resolute. He had always prided himself on challenging the status quo, and his declaration about the DOE was no different. But as he faced increasing pressure from the media, government officials, and educators, Musk realized that this conversation would be much more complicated than he had initially thought. What was the real cost of his vision? Could the future of education truly be detached from the very institution that had been guiding it for over a century? The fallout from Elon Musk's controversial statement was swift and intense. The media buzzed with outrage, confusion, and debates. News anchors, social media influencers, and political pundits were all scrambling to weigh in. each with their own perspective on the future of education. Was Musk just throwing out a shocking headline for attention? Or did he truly believe that an institution so ingrained in American society could be rendered obsolete? As soon as Musk's words went public, the social media landscape exploded. Twitter and Facebook were flooded with hashtags like #NDOE and #FutureOfEducation, while some critics called for Musk to backtrack. This is outrageous. The Department of Education supports millions of children across the nation, one tweet read. How can we throw away the very institution that ensures access to education for everyone, especially the most vulnerable? On the other hand, supporters of Musk rallied, believing that his bold statement wasn't just a critique but a call for change. Musk is right. The education system is broken. We need something better, something that works for today's world, one advocate posted. The current system is stuck in the past. We have the technology to do so much more. But in the midst of these polarized reactions, a growing tension began to unfold, one that wasn't just between Musk and his critics, but between the educators and students who had been affected by his words. As the days passed, various voices weighed in, each adding to the complexity of the debate. Teachers on the front lines. At schools across the country, teachers began to feel the strain of Musk's statement. For years, many educators had expressed frustration with the system, criticizing its outdated curricula, overcrowded classrooms, and lack of resources. Musk's words struck a chord with those who felt that the traditional system wasn't doing enough to support teachers and their students. But, while some teachers agreed that reforms were necessary, others felt that Musk's approach was far too extreme. Sarah Jenkins, a high school English teacher in Ohio, voiced her concerns in a televised interview. We need change, yes, but throwing out the Department of Education entirely? That's like throwing out the baby with the bathwater. The DOE has provided resources that help schools like mine stay afloat. If we remove that safety net, what happens to the kids who need it most? Jenkins wasn't alone. Across the nation, educators began organizing meetings to discuss how they could continue to advocate for better resources and more progressive teaching methods without sacrificing the structure and stability that the DOE provided. They wanted reform, but not an end to an institution that had, for better or worse, been essential to education for so long. Students and parents speak out. Meanwhile, students, especially those in low-income areas who had benefited most from federal programs, felt directly threatened by the idea of the DOE's dissolution. For many of them, the department had been a lifeline, ensuring their access to educational resources and opportunities that would otherwise have been out of reach. I don't know what Musk is thinking, said Jamie Harris, a sophomore from Baltimore. Without the DOE, my school wouldn't be able to provide the extra tutoring or college prep programs that helped me get into a better college. What happens to kids like me if that goes away? Parents echoed Jamie's concerns, wondering what would happen to the students who were already struggling. My son relies on the assistance the DOE provides. If Musk's plan goes through, what will happen to him? Will he have to fend for himself in a system that's already broken? Asked Amanda Ellis, a mother of two from Chicago. Musk's vision of a tech-driven future, powered by innovative tools and personalized learning, seemed like a distant dream to parents who struggled to make ends meet. For them, the reality of education was about getting children through the system and into a better future, not imagining a futuristic system that may or may not work. Political leaders and the fight for control. The political landscape grew even more tense. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle found themselves caught in the crossfire. Republicans who had long pushed for education reform seized on Musk's remarks as an opportunity to call for further privatization and a reduced role for the government in education. Senator Greg Walters of Texas, a well-known advocate for school choice, tweeted, "Elon Musk is speaking truth. The government's overreach in education is harming our kids. It's time to break free from the shackles of the DOE and give our children a real chance at success." But Democrats, who traditionally supported the Department of Education's role in ensuring equal access to education, lashed out at Musk's comments. Elon Musk doesn't understand the stakes for working-class families, Senator Maria Gonzalez of California said in a press conference. The DOE ensures that all children, regardless of their background, can access education. His plan would strip away the safety net for millions of American kids. The divide between political ideologies only deepened as the debate over the DOE's future became a national battleground. Lawmakers began to take sides, with some seeing Musk's comments as an opportunity to push their own agendas, while others viewed them as a dangerous path that would further harm the very students who needed the most support. The rise of the alternative education movement. Amid all the confusion, a growing movement began to gain traction. The idea of alternative education, whether it was tech-powered learning, decentralized schools, or more community-driven models, began to appeal to many who saw traditional institutions as inadequate for the demands of the 21st century. Musk's support for tech-driven solutions inspired several Silicon Valley startups to ramp up their efforts to create an entirely new learning ecosystem. Online schools, AI tutors, and gamified learning platforms began to rise in popularity. These new models promised to challenge the traditional structure of education, offering personalized, adaptive learning experiences that could reach students regardless of their location or financial background. But these innovations came with their own set of challenges. Critics questioned whether tech could truly replace the human connection in education, or if it would only deepen the digital divide between those who had access to technology and those who did not. As the conflict escalated, the question remained: could Elon Musk's vision for the future of education actually work, or would it leave millions of students behind? With the country divided, it was becoming clear that this debate was far from over. The true impact of Musk's statement would soon be revealed, and the fate of the American education system might depend on how this conflict played out. As the national debate over Elon Musk's comments intensified, an unexpected turn of events began to unfold. With each passing day, the growing tensions between the defenders of the Department of Education and Musk's supporters only seemed to deepen. The media frenzy was reaching a boiling point, but no one could have anticipated what would happen next. Elon Musk decided to personally enter the fray. The billionaire tech mogul, known for his bold actions and out-of-the-box thinking, announced that he was going to take a first-hand look at the state of America's education system. Musk, as expected, wasn't going to approach this the way the politicians or pundits had. Instead of just giving speeches or offering abstract opinions, he vowed to visit schools across the nation, meet with students, teachers, and administrators, and see for himself what was working and what wasn't. At first, many thought it was just another publicity stunt. After all, Musk had a history of embarking on audacious ventures, from launching electric cars to sending rockets into space. But as he boarded his private jet and flew from one state to another, visiting schools from rural towns to urban centers, it became clear this wasn't just another publicity grab. Elon's first stop was a public high school in Detroit, Michigan. The school had been struggling for years, with outdated textbooks, crowded classrooms, and underpaid teachers. Musk walked through the halls, his eyes scanning the worn-out walls and the overburdened students in the classrooms. He sat down with a group of teachers, listened to their frustrations, and asked them what they needed most to improve the situation. "Elon, we just need the resources to do our jobs effectively," said Ms. Jenkins, a math teacher who had worked at the school for over 15 years. "Our students are brilliant, but they don't have the tools to succeed. We need better access to technology, more one-on-one support, and most importantly, respect from those in charge." Musk nodded thoughtfully, his mind racing. As a man who had revolutionized industries with his innovative ideas, he couldn't help but see the disparity between the tech-driven world he inhabited and the classrooms where students were still learning from 20th-century methods. Yet, he didn't rush to offer solutions. Instead, he listened, giving the teachers space to express their concerns and frustrations. The next stop was in New York City, where Musk visited a charter school that prided itself on its cutting-edge curriculum. The contrast between the two schools was striking. In New York, students had access to high-tech resources, interactive learning platforms, and an environment that encouraged independent thinking. Here, Musk found students engaged, collaborating, and exploring their passions. "I see a future in education that looks a lot more like this," Musk remarked, watching a group of students work on a robotics project. "But we can't have one school thriving while another is falling apart." This realization hit Musk harder than he expected. As he flew to different cities, from Los Angeles to Houston, from Seattle to Miami, he witnessed firsthand the immense gap between schools in affluent areas and those in underfunded districts. It was a glaring issue that no one seemed to have an easy solution for. Technology, while powerful, couldn't replace the human connection and care that so many students needed. But Musk wasn't one to back away from a challenge. He began to think about how his companies could be involved in this education revolution. Tesla had already disrupted the automobile industry. SpaceX was challenging the way humans approached space exploration. Why couldn't he do the same for education? Musk started brainstorming with his engineers and visionaries at Tesla and SpaceX. What if they could design technology that would enable personalized learning on a mass scale? What if every student, no matter where they lived, had access to the kind of interactive, real-time learning that would give them a competitive edge? Could Musk's companies partner with schools to bring these innovative solutions into the classroom, bypassing the bureaucratic red tape of the Department of Education? As he continued his journey, Musk made a shocking announcement. He would create a pilot program, free from traditional educational constraints, that would bring technology directly into underserved classrooms. In these pilot schools, technology would be integrated into every aspect of the educational experience, from personalized AI tutors to virtual classrooms that could connect students in remote areas to the best educators in the world. Musk's plan was audacious. It would take years and millions, possibly billions of dollars, to implement on a nationwide scale. But as he looked at the faces of the students in the schools he visited, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. If there was one thing that Musk knew, it was that big challenges required big ideas, and he was ready to put everything on the line to try. Meanwhile, back in Washington, the Department of Education was preparing for a heated confrontation. After Musk's announcement, Secretary of Education Lillian Clark had to address the growing pressure. She had spent the past decade working to secure better funding for schools, pushing for greater equality, and ensuring that the government played an active role in shaping the nation's education policy. Musk's challenge posed a direct threat to everything she had worked for. She wasn't just defending a government bureaucracy. To Clark, the Department of Education represented the idea that every child in America, no matter their background, had an equal chance at success. Musk's tech-centric vision, while exciting, also seemed to leave too many questions unanswered. How would it address the needs of the most vulnerable students? How would it ensure equal access for all? "I'm not going to let one billionaire change the entire landscape of American education," Clark said firmly during a closed-door meeting. "We will adapt. We will innovate. But we will do it in a way that supports every child." For the first time in a long while, the country found itself at a crossroads. Could Elon Musk's radical vision for the future of education truly bring about the change that was needed? Or was the Department of Education, despite its flaws, still the best hope for a nation where every child had a chance to succeed? As Musk's journey continued, it became evident that this was no longer just a debate. It was the beginning of a larger, national conversation about what kind of education system America needed, and whether a new, untested approach could succeed where the old one had faltered. The tension reached its peak when Elon Musk made a surprising visit to a small school in a rural area of West Virginia. The school, like many others across the nation, was underfunded and struggling. The classrooms were outdated, and the students lacked basic resources that many others took for granted: computers, textbooks, even the most essential supplies. Musk had heard about this school from a teacher who had reached out to him, describing how difficult it was to engage students in a place where hope seemed scarce. It was here, amidst the rusted machinery of an industrial town slowly fading into history, that Musk's journey would take a profound turn. He arrived at the school in the early afternoon, greeted by a group of teachers, administrators, and a few students. Walking through the hallways, Musk felt the weight of their lives in a way he hadn't before. This wasn't Silicon Valley. There were no startup dreams in this town. There was no tech to revolutionize education. Just hardworking families trying to scrape by. As Musk entered the classroom, he was met with stares from a group of students sitting at their desks. Their faces were a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. One young girl, no older than 12, spoke up. "You're that guy, aren't you? The one who thinks the Department of Education doesn't matter. Do you think we don't need help?" Her voice wasn't hostile, but it was laced with the frustration of someone who had seen the world pass by while they struggled to catch up. Musk's heart sank. He could see the pain in her eyes, a pain he hadn't anticipated. These were the children he had hoped to help, the ones he wanted to inspire. But here, in the heart of America's forgotten places, his bold ideas felt hollow. "I didn't mean it that way," Musk said, his voice softer than usual. "I believe in you, and I want to help. But I also believe that we need a new way of thinking about how we help kids like you, how we make sure you have what you need to succeed." The young girl, whose name was Emily, looked at him for a long moment. Then she shrugged and went back to her desk. "It's all nice what you're saying, but we've heard it all before." It was a harsh reality, one Musk hadn't been prepared for. The digital age, with its promises of connection and opportunity, hadn't reached them. It hadn't reached Emily. And as he looked around the room at the other students, all of them sitting in cramped, poorly lit classrooms, he felt the crushing weight of his ambition collide with the deep-rooted problems of a broken system. Later that afternoon, after the visit, Musk sat alone in his car outside the school, staring out at the mountains in the distance. His mind was reeling. What did all of this mean? Could technology truly replace the foundation that institutions like the Department of Education had provided? Or had he, in his pursuit of innovation, lost sight of the most fundamental human need: connection? His phone buzzed. It was a text from one of his team members. "Elon, are you okay?" Musk didn't respond immediately. His mind wasn't on the future of technology. It was on the faces of those kids who had learned to expect very little from a system that had failed them time and time again. No amount of innovation could change the fact that without care, support, and understanding, even the best technologies wouldn't matter. Back in Washington, D.C., the conflict was escalating. Secretary of Education Lillian Clark had been preparing for the inevitable confrontation. With Musk's pilot program underway, the Department of Education felt as though it was being challenged at every turn. Schools across the nation were receiving offers to join Musk's new tech-driven experiment, and some administrators were beginning to express interest in pulling away from traditional government systems. But Clark wasn't backing down. She had spent her career ensuring that every child, no matter their socioeconomic background, had access to the tools they needed to succeed. She didn't just want to reform the system. She wanted to preserve its core values, the values that kept the most vulnerable students from being left behind. A week after Musk's visit to West Virginia, Clark gave an impassioned speech on national television. Her voice was steady, but there was a fire in her words. "I respect Elon Musk and his vision for the future," she began. "But we must not lose sight of what education means for our children. We cannot build a future for them based solely on technology and corporate-driven solutions. Our kids deserve more than just data. They deserve opportunity. They deserve a chance." Her words resonated with many, especially parents who feared that Musk's vision might not take the needs of their children into account. Was a world driven by technology enough to support the next generation? Clark had no doubt that innovation was important, but she also believed that it was crucial to strike a balance between progress and the human element that education required. And then, the unthinkable happened. In a moment of profound clarity, Elon Musk made a public statement that took the world by surprise. After weeks of criticism and growing internal conflict, Musk announced that he would be adjusting his approach to education. Rather than trying to dismantle the Department of Education, he would focus on collaborating with it. His companies, Tesla and SpaceX, would work in tandem with public schools, using their resources to build innovative learning tools that could complement the work already being done in traditional classrooms. "This isn't about replacing the old system," Musk said in a live stream. "This is about improving it together. We have the power to make the education system more efficient, more equitable, and more connected. But we can't do that by fighting each other." Musk's admission was a turning point. It was a moment of vulnerability that spoke volumes. For the first time, he acknowledged that his grand vision couldn't work in a vacuum. Education was a collaborative effort, one that required the input of teachers, administrators, and yes, even government officials. He had learned a valuable lesson that day. Technology alone wouldn't solve the problems that had been years in the making. In the days that followed Elon Musk's unexpected shift in strategy, the landscape of education in America began to change. The public's reaction was mixed. Some were impressed by Musk's humility and willingness to adjust his plans, while others were skeptical, wondering if this was just another attempt to save face. However, The most important part of this journey wasn't just the reaction from the public. It was the tangible steps that followed. Musk's decision to collaborate with the Department of Education set off a series of meetings between him, Secretary Lillian Clark, and a team of educators. What initially seemed like an impossible union, the intersection of Silicon Valley and government bureaucracy, soon blossomed into something greater. The discussions were intense, the disagreements numerous, but the shared goal was undeniable: improving the future of America's children. Musk's companies, Tesla and SpaceX, began to send resources directly to the most underserved schools. His engineers and tech experts worked side by side with teachers to develop interactive learning platforms and AI-driven tools that personalized education based on each student's needs. At the same time, the Department of Education increased funding to schools in desperate need, ensuring that every classroom could access the technology that was being rolled out. The results were nothing short of transformative. In small rural towns, students who had once been invisible in the larger educational system now had access to resources that gave them a fair shot at success. Teachers were given the support they needed to guide their students through this new digital landscape. Students who had once struggled to keep up with their peers were now thriving, their potential unlocked by personalized learning tools that adapted to their pace and style of learning. In urban areas, where overcrowded classrooms had made it nearly impossible for teachers to give individual attention, the integration of technology helped bridge the gap. Musk's vision of a connected classroom, where no student was left behind, began to take shape. But the true test of this new collaboration came when Musk returned to the small school in West Virginia, the school that had left such an impact on him. It had been months since his visit, and the community was still hesitant. The teachers, once skeptical of his promises, were now cautiously optimistic. Could this time be different? Could the government, tech companies, and schools really work together? When Musk entered the school again, he saw a different environment. The same worn walls and old desks were still there, but something had changed. The classrooms were filled with students who were now engaged and excited about their lessons. The technology that had once been a distant dream was now part of their everyday lives. Emily, the young girl who had confronted Musk about his views, was now sitting at a desk with a tablet in front of her, her eyes focused on a lesson in science. She looked up as Musk entered the room, and for the first time, she smiled. "Mr. Musk," she said softly, "I thought you were just here to talk. But now, we actually get to learn something new. You really meant what you said, didn't you?" Musk's heart swelled with pride. In that moment, all the months of planning, negotiating, and experimenting had led to something more meaningful than he could have imagined. It wasn't just about revolutionizing education. It was about making a real, lasting impact on the lives of students like Emily. It was about showing them that they mattered, that their futures were worth fighting for. Over the next few months, more schools followed suit. Public-private partnerships began to grow, and while the road wasn't without its bumps, there was a renewed sense of hope in the air. Teachers who had once felt overburdened by the demands of outdated curriculums were now able to focus on what they did best: teaching. Students who had once fallen through the cracks were now thriving, and the future seemed brighter. Musk's experiment wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The collaboration between the Department of Education and private companies had created something revolutionary, a new model for how education could work in the digital age. And it wasn't just about technology, it was about people: teachers, students, parents, and administrators all working together toward a shared goal: giving every child the opportunity to succeed. A nation reflects the power of change. The national debate over the Department of Education had not ended with a clear winner. There were still differing opinions, and some continued to argue that a completely new system was needed. But for the first time in years, the conversation was centered on solutions. Solutions that took into account both the power of technology and the need for human connection. Secretary Lillian Clark, once wary of Musk's plan, had come to see the value of collaboration. "We don't have all the answers," she said in a final press conference, "but we are learning, evolving, and growing together. That is what matters." And Musk, for his part, had learned a valuable lesson as well. Technology could not replace the heart and soul of education, but it could be a powerful tool when combined with the dedication and passion of the people who cared most about the students. Musk's journey had begun with a desire to change everything. But in the end, it was about finding a way to change the system in a way that brought the best of both worlds together. The road ahead would not be easy, and the work was far from over. But for the first time in a long time, the people of the nation had a renewed sense of hope. Hope that their children's future was worth fighting for. Hope that, despite the challenges, a new chapter of American education was unfolding. Musk, standing on the steps of the school in West Virginia, watched as the students filed out, their faces full of excitement and possibility. He knew the journey wasn't over. It had only just begun. And with that, he smiled, knowing that the future had just taken its first step towards something better.